Fareed, thanks for joining us. So President Trump called the meeting extremely productive. He definitely tried to put a positive spin on, let's be frank, he was trying to bring peace and end a war. I mean, there's nothing wrong about his goal, but it does appear that there really wasn't anything concrete achieved. No ceasefire, no sanctions relief or sanctions imposed. We don't really know where we are other than Putin got himself a summit in Alaska. What do you make of what we just saw?
Yeah, I think you have it right, Jake. Look, the atmospherics of the entire summit was somewhat cringeworthy. The fact that Putin was being welcomed on American soil, the fact that Trump gave him literally a red carpet treatment, the kind he has rarely given to any, Democratic ally of the United States. You can tell that Trump thinks Putin is an equal, is this big shot on the world stage, and he's been treated by the rest of the West as a kind of pariah. I mean, he can't go to Europe because he'd be arrested. And so there was a lot of the atmospherics that were cringeworthy. But I will say, on the most important thing, at least for me, it was positive that there was no deal. I think everyone was worried that there was going to be a deal in which Trump was going to make major concessions. I don't think anyone thought Putin was going to make any concessions. The fear was that Donald Trump was going to cave in various ways, sell out Ukraine, sell out the Europeans, and he didn't do that. And so I think, I'm at least relieved. Now, when you watch it, what you saw was Putin had clearly decided his strategy was he was going to make no substantive concessions of any kind, but he was going to really amp up the flattery of Trump. So he says if Trump had been president, there would have been no war, which is easy for him to say now. Trump should get the Nobel Prize. He's amazing. All that, is cheap and easy rhetoric for Putin, but he laid that on thick. But at the end of the day, he made no concessions. So Trump comes back empty-handed, but, in a way, better to come back empty-handed than to have given away, a quarter of Ukraine.
Right, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people breathing easy in Ukraine because of that. I wonder if you think, with no apparent concrete progress at the summit, at least none that was announced, is there an upside for President Trump? I mean, he can say he tried for peace, and that's not nothing, but there's also the flip side of that, which is Putin might leave here bolstered, both domestically and on the international stage, no?
Well, Putin has gotten a lot in the sense that he got the recognition, he got the stage, he got the invitation to the United States. He also got the delay of all kinds of new sanctions that Trump had threatened. Remember, Trump had set deadlines, and he said if there isn't a ceasefire, Putin doesn't agree to these terms, there will be consequences, there will be severe consequences. None of that appears to be happening, and in fact, Foreign Minister Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said he expects sanctions to be lifted as a result of this. Now, he said that a little earlier, so we don't know where that is. But yeah, it's hard to spin this in a positive direction if you believe that, it is important to preserve Ukraine as an independent sovereign state. But it wasn't a disaster. And again, I will give Donald Trump credit for this, that presumably Putin stuck to his guns and Trump didn't concede. It's possible there is some framework that was discussed that he now needs to take to the Ukrainians and the Europeans, but Donald Trump tends to be fairly indiscreet. So if there is such a framework, if anything substantive was agreed on, we will know in the next hour. It is inconceivable to me that Trump will be able to keep that quiet. He will feel the urge to boast. So the fact that at least so far we haven't heard much leads me to your conclusion that, really at the end of the day, there's nothing to show for.
Right. I mean, he did say, just to quote him, many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant. Well, we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I assume we all here on the panel think that one that's the most significant would be the ceasefire. But President Trump also said that he's now going to call NATO leaders and Ukrainian President Zelensky What do you see happening next? President Trump did talk about they would talk soon and probably would see each other again soon. There was some idea floating that the next summit might even be in Moscow, although he acknowledged he'd get a little heat on that one, although he didn't say no. What do you think happens next, and what message would it send if Trump were to go to Moscow for the next summit?
Well, that would be a terrible idea, because the entire way that Trump has handled these negotiations from the start has been to make preemptive concessions to the Russians before the negotiations began. Remember, what are Putin's main demands? He wants to keep all of Ukraine that he has conquered. In fact, he wants a bit more. Trump initially basically conceded that, Pete Hegseth as well. He wanted that NATO guarantee that Ukraine will not be a member of NATO. Trump has said that's going to happen. He wanted to be sure there would be no American troops on Ukrainian soil. Trump has said that. Then he gives him the summit in the U.S. The next thing would be to give him a summit where he can play host and peacemaker. But we've gotten nothing back from Putin. And it's been a series of unilateral concessions to Putin, and it's not clear yet what the United States, the West, is getting. So I'm all for making a deal. I'm all for compromise. I'm all for ending the war. But the strategy of preemptive concessions to Vladimir Putin has never worked in the past, and is unlikely to work now. What we need is pressure on Putin, military pressure through military aid to Ukraine. That's what will get his attention.
Fareed Zakaria, thank you so much. Anderson, back to you in D.C.
Jake, thanks a lot. Here with me now is Leon Panetta. He served as former defense secretary and former CIA director under President Obama, and he was President Clinton's chief of staff. Secretary Panetta, I mean, you have seen a lot of these kind of global world leader meetings, these kind of summits. Did anything come out of this? Have you seen one quite like this?
Look, Anderson, I think the fundamental test for this summit was pretty clear, that the president had to get a ceasefire. That's at the top of the list. And he himself said he needed to get a ceasefire. And that they ultimately, if they got a ceasefire, they would then establish a negotiation between Ukraine and Russia to work out the issues on territory and on security. That would have been a successful summit. That did not happen. There was no deal. There was no there. There was no ceasefire. So it's pretty hard for me to understand just exactly what was the purpose of this summit, because whatever I thought was the fundamental test of success was not achieved.
In fact, I want to play something the president said Wednesday when asked by a reporter about what would happen if this was not a successful summit. Let's just play that.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
There will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
Secretary Panetta, we certainly did not hear on that stage when the president was face to face with Vladimir Putin anything about any kind of consequences or any kind of failure. He's certainly not characterizing it as a failure. He did say, there's not a deal until there's a deal. He said some progress was made. I mean, is he now in a position where he just ignores, his promise on Wednesday that there would be severe consequences? Does he just ignore that? What do you do if you're president of the United States now?
Anderson, I think the fundamental problem here is the way that President Trump thought he could make progress with Putin. He really felt that because of their friendship, that he could basically schmooze Putin, do the red carpet, have him drive together towards the summit, and that ultimately by the power of Trump's personality, that somehow he could get Putin to agree to a ceasefire. For all of those of us who dealt with Putin That's not the way to deal with Putin. You don't schmooze Putin. You've got to be tough with Putin. Putin is a tough actor. Putin knows what he wants. Putin is not to be trusted. And you've got to be tough with him. You've got to come down. You've got to implement sanctions. You've got to provide weapons to the Ukrainians. That is being tough with Putin. That's what Putin understands. It's the power of force. And Trump somehow thinks that he doesn't have to resort to that kind of tough action and that he can do it through the power of his personality. And frankly, that's not working.